Hey Top Shelfers, welcome to Behind the Bar, where we make historic cocktails that are enjoyed every day. As you know, this is exclusive content just for you guys on our email list, as well as our locals patrons. So thank you so much for being part of the Top Shelf history community. Today, what I have for you is an old cocktail coming all the way back from the 1800s, known as the Old Sport. Now, I found this recipe in our favorite cocktail recipe book, Just Cocktails, my great-grandfather's old recipe book, and this particular cocktail looks fantastic. It's got so many different elements going into it, but I just can't wait to try them all out and put them into a single glass. So, for today's drink, we are going to start out with a rocks glass, as this is what our entire drink is going to go into. We're going to put that off to the side for now because this drink is going to be served neat. Now, for our drink, we're going to start off with a half jig of rye. Now, a half jig in 1890s terms, mind you, means that it's going to be 1 full fluid ounce, because back then, prior to Prohibition, as is stated by the recipe book, is that a full jig would be 2 fluid ounces. After Prohibition, they changed that to 1.5 fluid ounces, but since we're going with an 1890s version, we're going to go with the 1890s definition of a jig. So let's get out 2 ounces of our rye whiskey. Now, I'm going to use Templeton Rye Whiskey. This is a 4-year aged whiskey. Pretty good stuff. This is known as the good stuff. Also, this was Al Capone's favorite brand in terms of rye whiskey. So a little bit of history connection there going into this drink. And I think it's only fitting considering he was the king of alcohol during Prohibition. So we will put in our 2 fluid ounces of rye whiskey into our jig and put this into our shaker. There we go. Next, we're going to follow that up with a half jig of sherry. I just realized that I actually put too much of rye because it was a half jig, not a full jig. So I'm going to measure out 1 ounce here. This happens sometimes when you're not paying attention, like me, and you pour out too much. So we took out 1 ounce because this is supposed to be a half jig, so it's only supposed to be 1 fluid ounce, not 2. Put that off to the side, and now we're going to take out our sherry. Now, this is Harvey's, the Bristol Cream. A lot of sherries have a great sweetness to it. It is known as a dessert fortified wine, similar to port in that regard, but it's very popular in England and in the UK, and the Bristol sherry is relatively inexpensive and quite delicious. So we're going to throw in 1 ounce of our Harvey's Bristol sherry. Or the Bristol Cream, I should say. So we'll pour that on out. It's got a great color to it, a great caramelly color, kind of similar to Coca-Cola in that sense. Next, it calls for 2 teaspoons of syrup. I have my little teaspoon device here. That way we can measure this exactly, because we don't want to make this drink too sweet, considering we already are introducing the sherry. I have made for myself my own simple syrup. Now, what I did with this is that I took 1.5 cups to 1 cup of water, so 1.5 cups of sugar to 1 cup of water. This makes it a little bit more syrupy, so a little bit higher sugar content, and this is great if it's standing alone. Now, mind you, if you want to infuse your simple syrups with different flavors, I would go with a 1-to-1 ratio, but for our purposes here, a 1.5 to 1 ratio works just fine. We're going to measure out our 2 teaspoons here. I want to be very precise with this. Like I said, we don't want to make this drink too sweet. So we have 1 and 2. So we have 2 teaspoons in there. Now, the reason why I'm using simple syrup here is that we want to make sure that this gets mixed into, that was the word I was looking for, mixed into the drink correct. When we're using granulated sugar, it takes a while to dissolve. It doesn't always stay really well. The sweetness may not always transfer because it doesn't break down easy. That's why simple syrup is so popular in cocktails, because it introduces sweetness in a really easy way, and it will stay. The next thing that we want to add here is going to be 2 dashes of orange bitters, followed by 1 dash of Peychaud's bitters. Now, I have Angostura orange bitters right here that we're going to add 2 dashes here. Now, a dash in our book comes out to 1/3 of a teaspoon, but considering the measurements that we have already on our drink, or I should say in our bottle, is that when you just tap this twice, it's essentially going to be 2. Now, we already saw that there was some coming out when I poured this over, so we could consider that to be the first dash, followed by a second dash. Next, we want to throw in our Peychaud's Bitters. Now, one of the cool things about Peychaud's Bitters is that it really became popular with the Sazerac, which was a very famous cocktail, even known as the cocktail of the city of New Orleans, because Peychaud was a pharmacist in the city of New Orleans and came up with this recipe particularly for cocktails and other different tonics and health drinks. And it's made with a very select amount of herbs and spices. It's quite delicious, and it really amplifies your cocktail. Having two different bitters here is going to make this drink quite unique. Now we're just going to tap that in. That should be 1/3 of a teaspoon there, right there. And then lastly, it tells us to rinse our cocktail glass in apricotine. Now, apricotine is similar to an apricot schnapps or an apricot cordial. Now, I don't have that on hand. It's not easy to find, not surprisingly enough, but I believe that we'll be able to get away with, or at least that it will transfer quite well if we use apricot brandy, because it will still have the apricot flavor. It will be a little bit more boozy than, say, apricotine, which typically is more towards the wine in consistency, like a apricot flavored wine. This will be just a little bit higher in alcohol content, but I think it will still introduce what we're searching for here that we'll be missing in the apricotine. So we're just going to put in a little bit. Yeah, that should be just enough. Yeah, we can even pour out the excess here, and that will be fine. What we're trying to do here is that we're trying to rinse our glass. We want the essence of the apricot brandy or the apricotine flavor to just rinse the glass. If you have an opportunity to get to apricotine, then I would definitely suggest using it, as we want to be as sincere to the original recipe as possible. But if you don't have it on hand, apricot brandy will be easier to find. So I'm going to pour out all of the excess here into our excess rye whiskey. That'll be a nice little side drink for me. But I think we've got a nice rinse going on in our rocks glass there. And the last thing that we want to do is we want to take some ice, and we're going to put this into our cocktail glass, and then we're going to stir. Mainly because this is all going to be liqueurs. We don't want to shake it because there's no need for the introduction of air to this particular drink. So I will grab our shaker and I will begin stirring. And the great thing about this is that this is going to waken up all the flavors in the rye whiskey, as well as the other liqueurs that are in there, and it's going to dilute our drink a little bit while chilling it down. It's a 3-for-1, which is just brilliant, so that we'll have a cold drink with as much flavor as possible, and it will be slightly diluted, so it won't be too overpowering. I'm just going to stir this a little bit more. You can see there we're getting it all nice and friendly, and that is just about right. Oh, this smells so good. Put down our bar spoon there, and then we take our strainer, we strain into our rocks glass. I wanted to serve this neat. You can also serve this on the rocks, but I feel like since we've already stirred it in our glass, we don't want to dilute the drink any more than it has already been diluted. So if you did want rocks in here, I would suggest actual whiskey stones. That way it doesn't dilute the drink. But there we have the Old Sport. And I think to garnish this drink, considering the flavors that we have, a little bit of orange peel will go a long way. So allow me to grab my peeler here. I'll just take off this sticker. Got a good amount of skin right there that we can peel off. So it's perfect. I think this will be just the right addition. We're going to get those oils out, add a little oranginess to it. And there we have the Old Sport. Let's give it a try. Obviously the orange aromatically is being introduced first, because we just sprayed all of those oils in there, but this smells like such a complex, delicious drink. Can't wait to try it. Oh, that's blissful, honestly. I think they knew what they were doing prior to Prohibition, which is probably the reason why they prohibited everything, because they had mastered alcohol, so much so that you wanted to drink this forever. This is a delightful drink. The sherry is such a welcomed amount of sweetness here to the rye whiskey. Nothing is out of balance. This just tastes beautiful, absolutely blissful. The amount of sugar that's in here is carrying that sweetness with the sherry. The orange peel is actually quite nice because it gives a refreshing note on the front end because there's a lot of sweetness on the back end. But the bitters add a nice bite because there is a lot of sweetness with the sherry. But it's glorious. It's a well-balanced drink. I could have this any day of the week. There's a reason why the 1890s, the gay 90s, as they call it in the book, were so happy because drinks like this existed. And it is fantastically made and quite enjoyably drunk. Honestly, guys, you guys have to try this out. Please consider giving this a taste because this is fantastic. And then let me know what you guys think because this is an excellent recipe from the 1900s. But from all of us here at Top Shelf History, as usual, we love you guys. And we do all of this because of y'all's support. We thank you so much for your support up to now and your continued support in the future. But from all of us here at Top Shelf History, cheers.